All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Today marks a very important day. It's the first day the candidates can start to circulate nominating petitions to get on the ballot for the spring primary. And we're here because we really want to highlight what we think is one of the most important races on that ballot. Unfortunately, sometimes it gets caught up in the churn of all the other races on the ballot. But we think that the school board elections that are coming up are going to be very important, just like they are every other year. And it's our hope here as a coalition of different organizations that we can really help raise the profile and help the voters of Pittsburgh understand the issues that their school board directors are dealing with. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to James Fogarty, the executive director of A+ Schools.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Graham. Thank you for organizing and helping us get this started. I have a couple slides, nothing major, but wanted to just say thank you and welcome. I want to also thank our three coalition members that are joining me today. Ms. Esther Bush, the president and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh, Rosa Maria Cristello, the executive director of the Latino Community Center, and Jenna Barron, the executive director of the Alliance for Refugee Youth Support and Education. All these organizations represent families that are some of our most vulnerable families in our region, and they work to make sure that those families and students have what they need. So before I hand it off to them, I want to just walk you through a little bit of reasons about why we're asking you to vote school board first in this election. For one, this is our third iteration of doing this, and we're doing it in this time where some of the typical campaign activities of door knocking and really getting out there, as we saw in the presidential election, aren't going to be able to happen. So we really wanted to make sure that you all knew that school board candidates can start circulating petitions today. We know that there's a growing list of organizations joining us. We have about 15 currently. We have 15 currently that are supporting this effort to encourage their communities, their constituents to vote school board first. And in the past year, we know just how critical schools are to the well-being of our children and families in our region. You know, one of the things that I like to put out every year, especially when we talk about, what it means to have a school board that is, engaged and active in our work, is the fact that the school board has a general operating budget that's nearly $100 million greater than the city of Pittsburgh's. These two numbers of the operating budgets of the two, and if you include additional funds that the district spends from what they call special funds, so Title I and a lot of federal dollars that aren't included in that, you're closer to $750 million that the district spends on an annual basis or will spend in the coming year. Now, that there are lots of needs that the district is meeting, right? The district feeds thousands of children every day. The district takes care of their health with nurses in every school. The district transports children not only from their own schools, but for our private schools and for our charter schools, right? So there are a variety of services that are included in that dollar, but we want to make sure that those candidates that are overseeing that budget, that provide the vote to approve it, are making sure that it's being spent well and they're good stewards for that. And so one of the things we want to make sure that's happening is in terms of making sure students succeed, right? So you can see these are data that are a little old, but third grade reading proficiency for the district at large is about 55%. For Black third graders, it's 38%. Our middle school math proficiency is around 24%. High school graduation rate, a little over 80%. And completion of college or trade school at about 31%. So, those are the things that all of these services and all of these dollars we're hoping will being spent will create for our students. And why is that important? Well, the inflection point study that's now almost 3 years old that was done by the Allegheny Conference really talked about the opportunities and jobs that exist in this region, but for too many children, the lack of the right educational and skills, knowledge, and dispositions is meaning that they're not able to access those jobs. So I won't belabor these points other to say school board's a very important job. It's a voluntary job. So what we're asking folks today is if you think you can make a difference for our children in our region, there is no greater way to do that than by running for school board. So we hope many of you will consider bringing your skills and talents to our board because it's just so important. I'm going to hand it now over to Ms. Bush because Ms. Esther Bush sees what's happening with our families and our children in our region in a much deeper way as the president and CEO of the Urban League. And thank you for joining us, Ms. Bush.
Absolutely, and good morning to everyone. And I really want to thank A+ Schools for making sure that we focus on this most critical and important topic. The Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh has a long and proud history of advocating for African Americans and indeed all children to exercise the power of the vote. Yes, voting is power, and it should be used to voice your wishes, the wishes of the voter. I was raised to believe that education was the great equalizer, but something is going wrong because our kids are not learning the way we expected them to learn when you talk about passing from one grade to the next. I am sure all of you in the audience have heard about the report that the city of Pittsburgh put out last year. Let me share some detail, and I'm sorry, it's 2019, this came out. The city of Pittsburgh's Gender Equity Commission report, Pittsburgh's inequality across gender and race. And what they did was compare 90 cities and found the following conditions in Pittsburgh were among the worst. Black male and female child poverty rates were at 63% and 55%, and poverty rates for Black women aged 25 to 64 were at 39%. As soon as we start talking about poverty, everyone should have a very clear understanding of the uphill battle that parents and children have relative to education. Black boys and girls in public high school who passed at least one AP test, zero, none of them passed an AP test. That should scare you no matter what race you are, or if your children are grown or not even in public school. It impacts who we are as a city, as a community, as a city that's trying to move from A to B. Black boys and girls in public high schools who took the SAT was only 7%, and who took the ACT was only 11%. Come on, that means Black kids aren't even thinking about going on to college. Even given the Pittsburgh Promise and other supports that are out there to help them. Forget race. This should be frightening for the city that you live in. Even if you do not have sympathy for individual life that is so disadvantaged by their Pittsburgh Public Schools education that they may not ever be able to overcome it, you need to be concerned as a resident of Pittsburgh for the economic impact that such negative statistics have on our city and on our region. There is no elected position with the potential of improving educational circumstances and therefore outcomes than with our school board. Yes, the school boards are the last on a list of elected officials, but I would dare underscore they are one of the most powerful ones because they influence our children, therefore our future. And the city of Pittsburgh in general, including all of us, need to be coming together. I was getting ready to say, and I will go ahead and finish and say, to fight for our kids. The word fight has such new meaning now from over the last couple weeks. But yes, I will say we must fight for the future of Pittsburgh and for our children. There is no elected position with the potential of improving educational circumstances and therefore outcomes, again, than that of the school board. If you are interested in ending systemic racism in Pittsburgh, you can start by electing compassionate, concerned, informed members of the Pittsburgh School Board. Please vote. Use the power of your vote. A school board member can be an equalizer. Please help us get there.
Ms. Bush, thank you so much. Appreciate you and your leadership in our region. I'm going to hand it now over to Rosa Maria Costello, who can tell you more about the challenges and opportunities that are facing immigrant communities, especially the Latino immigrant community here in the city of Pittsburgh. Rosa?
Yes, hi, thank you for having me here this morning. I agree with everything that was just said, but I do have additional words that I just want to share today. And that is that there is nothing more important than a child's education, nothing. It is our responsibility to ensure that every child gets access to an equitable education that both exposes them to the real world, our real history, and challenges them to see themselves in it as contributing members of society. That is our mandate as a community. And we know that the world we live in is changing, including here in Pittsburgh. There are more immigrants coming to the region. There are more people from different backgrounds coming here. There are individuals whose main language is not English. They have multiple languages that they speak, and their English is just one of the many that they're learning. We also know that our current environment requires a different response. We're all pivoting. And so the amount of influence that school board members have, the importance of school board members cannot be understated. We need school board members that understand that things are changing, that understand that not all children are the same, and that can speak to that and advocate for every single child in our district. Latino children are becoming more and more of the percentage of Pittsburgh public schools. And we need to acknowledge that. We need to acknowledge that their needs are different. And for so long, we've been trying to advocate for that and to realize that support for kids that have gone through traumatic events, that needs to be part of what we're talking about in the schools. Children are not going to be able to sit there and listen to what's being taught if we're not addressing the whole child. And so all I really wanted to say today is that if this gives you a burning feeling, if you know that this is that this isn't working or that you want to change, run for school board now. Like, we need community voices on this board. We need individuals that can understand that governance is key, that understands transparency, that can work with the community for change, and just work for every single child in our district.
Thank you so much, Rosa Maria. We appreciate your leadership and all the work you do to not only advocate on behalf of your families, but to provide them food, to ensure they have school supplies, and to make sure that they have the supports they need from our public schools. So appreciate you and all the work you do in your partnership. Now I'm going to turn to Jenna Barron, who is the Executive Director of the Alliance for Refugee Youth Support and Education, also known as ARISE. And Jenna can speak to a youth voice that isn't always heard, our immigrant and refugee students who she works with very closely, and their families, to ensure that they get to and through high school well. So Jenna, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, James. Yeah, and I also wholeheartedly agree with everything that Rosa shared and Ms. Esther Bush shared. And before, as I was preparing for this, I just wanted to go to the website of PPS to make sure I was on the same page about how we define the responsibilities of board members. And the sentence that stood out was, the board is a policy-making body committed to providing the best education possible for every student by providing outstanding teachers, programs, and services that enable every student to achieve their maximum potential. And I think Ms. Esther Bush and Rosa spoke to just like the implications of that responsibility, which I just want to reiterate. And I have 3 points that I wanted to make. The first being super simple, which is that we need thoughtful and committed leaders who meaningfully understand and represent the experiences of PPS students and families. And I had come to this today thinking about, how can we inspire people to get out to vote? And now after hearing Rosa, I'm thinking, oh, right, we also need people to, step up to run for school board who represent the experiences of PPS students and families. So I just want to underscore that. And the second point I want to make is in terms of the responsibilities board members carry, specifically in the context of our work at ARISE with immigrant refugee youth. We have learned so much from them about both positive and negative experiences they have in schools. And we know that there are teachers and administrators who, as individuals and through relationship building with students, are going above and beyond each and every day to make the most out of what they have, but we need better investments for English learners in our schools. As Rosa talked about, there is a growing immigrant population coming to Pittsburgh public schools, and our investments should reflect the number of families who are trusting the district with their child's education, right? And based on what we've been able to witness as advocates who are working alongside our students, unfortunately, like historically, we have not seen those investments made in the experiences of immigrant and refugee youth in schools. And just to speak to an example of this, of course, like any group of people, immigrant and refugee youth are not a monolith. And but there are trends in terms of how students are experiencing schools. And one thing we see with a lot of our students is that due to displacement prior to coming to the US, there's interrupted formal education, which means that students have not had access to a consistent, structured formal education environment. So you can just imagine what it feels like for our students to show up and go to Alderdice or Brashear, right? Where it's a massive building with hundreds of students, all different confusing options and pathways, not many adults in the building who speak or represent the students' language and culture, right? So there are just so many ways that our schools are currently really unwelcoming to our students, even despite the individual efforts we see from really committed educators and administrators. In order for our schools to actually be welcoming places where our students get to thrive and have access to resources, it needs to come from the top. Those investments and the prioritization of our students need to come from the top. So that's something that we want to see and that we really haven't seen historically. And the third and final point, which is another super obvious one, is we've got to vote for those who can't, right? People who can't go to the polls. And as we mentioned, our school board members have immense power, and the implications of their responsibility are huge on our communities, especially those who have been most historically marginalized. And in the context of our work and the families that we serve, even those who are on a pathway to citizenship or those who are not due to regressive immigration policies, a lot of folks can't go to the polls to vote for school board members who represent their needs and experiences, and which feels acutely unfair, right? Because it's a group of folks who are arguably one of the most affected by structural inequities. So I just wanted to reiterate that we all have a responsibility to show up for our community by voting, because our school board members have the power to choose, we have the power to choose the type of leaders that we want to see, and who have the power especially to make things better for families who have been historically the least able or feel less welcome to engage with schools. So that's all I have to share today. I'm really looking forward to being part of more conversations and really inspired by the work and you, Ms. Bush and Rosa.
Thanks so much, Jenna. So this is meant to be a short campaign kickoff. I'm going to do a couple a little bit more, and then I'm going to hand it over to Graham to give you a little bit more details. And then we'll have a couple minutes for questions. I know Ms. Bush has to hop at 10:30, and so do our other guests. So one, we have big issues to face that this school board is going to be wrestling with. Not only just how we reopen schools safely, both now, which our board is wrestling with, but in the fall and coming year. How do we support our students with additional supports because of what has happened over the past year in terms of online learning? For some, it's worked okay. For many, it hasn't. And so we have to make sure that we're, continuing to talk about that, to spend those federal dollars that are coming through the Recovery Act to ensure that those dollars are spent well and on our students in terms of their supports. The final thing is, we have a real structural issue around how we sustain our public education system financially here, right? The district's facing a $39 million deficit. There was a proposal for school closures just a couple weeks ago. So there's a lot of questions about the future, and those questions will be answered by this board and those who are elected this both in the who are chosen this spring in the primary and then in the fall in the general election. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Graham to talk to you a little bit more about the timeline of this campaign, what we hope to do in terms of informing the community. And we encourage any other organization that wants to get involved to just go to voteschoolboardfirst.org, where there's going to be a ton of information about the candidates, about how to get involved, etc. So Graham, I'll hand it over to you.
Perfect, thanks, James. Yeah, just wanted to highlight our website, voteschoolboardfirst.org. Right now, voters can find different links on there, including voter registration, figuring out which school board district you live in, and then some instructions for vote by mail. And I just wanted to briefly highlight some of those dates. The last day to register to vote before the primary is May 3rd. The last day to request a mail-in or absentee ballot is May 11th. And remember, Election Day is May 18th this year. I encourage folks to go to that website. There's some volunteer sign-up forms. We're going to be having some opportunities for folks to engage directly with voters, phone banking, to remind folks about the school board election and help answer any questions that folks may have about voter registration or vote by mail.